Also because I stole them. No, I'm kidding. They're velvet. And they're also really useful for truck.
Hi. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about how we interpret myths and legends from classic works of literature in our modern media. Most of these legends come from biblical stories or really anything Norse mythology and Greek. Those are the main ones I'm going to talk about today. Our modern interpretation tends to contrast the original text in many ways. They often lead their audience to believe that this twisted world that they created that's completely different than the original text is the true form. So, firstly, in Indiana Jones, and I'm sorry for spoilers, but there's a lot. For example, in the first installment of the Indiana Jones series, The Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indy explains, quote-unquote, legends about the Ark of the Covenant, stating that the Ark was almost like a judgment tool or a weapon for battle. Whereas this is semi-true in the Bible, where in the Bible it talks about, if you looked at it, okay.
Remember, ignore your audience.
Okay. If you look at, the Bible talks about, the Bible talks about how if you looked on the ark while God's presence was there, you would die. And also in the Indiana Jones series, in this movie, they often mix up Egyptian myth into the lore. For example, they talk about the Staff of Ra as if it's connected to the biblical story, even though that's from Egyptian myth. Another one of the legends that this series highlights is the legend of the Holy Grail. In the movie, Indy searches for the Grail believing that it has healing powers, and drinking the cup would provide a stronger grasp of mortality. Similar to the origin of the Grail, the cup did possess powers of healing. But in the original context, Percival, the hero of that story, didn't know what the powers the Grail possessed. In the story, he travels and he's shown the Grail. He doesn't have to find it, but he doesn't ask what its purpose is and leaves a very profitable moment behind. And then continuing on, in Norse mythology, it is often skewed, much like other ones. In Marvel's adaptation, some of the characters tend to be completely mixed up. For example, relationships between Thor, Loki, and Hela are not that of siblings like they are in Marvel. Firstly, Thor and Loki are not siblings in the least. Loki is merely a friend of Thor and Odin. Loki is extremely clever and witty, like he is in the movies, but he takes more of a court jester role, being easily manipulated and doing God's bidding, but also pulling one over on them. And Thor is completely opposite than his MCU persona. He, instead of being a leader and a charismatic, he is more of an alcoholic who is kind of dumb, to say it nicely.
Have you seen Avengers Endgame?
He's always being tricked by Loki. And finally, Hela. Oh, Hela. She's not Thor's sister. She's not Loki's sister. She is, in fact, Loki's daughter, the result of Loki and a horse. Take your time. Marvel was correct in stating that she's the goddess of the dead, as she is, but instead of being an attractive actress, she is half dead, half alive. Literally split down the middle. And the giant wolf in Thor Ragnarok, as most of you probably know, is actually her brother. More specifically on Ragnarok, though, it is described as a time when the gods are asleep. Winter will last forever, and people will turn against each other. Same with the animals, and the sun and the moon will be stolen from the sky. And this obviously causes outrage as people are fighting amongst themselves. Loki's son, the wolf, is bringing destruction wherever he can, along with the Midgardian snake. And for those of you who don't know what the Midgardian snake, it's a snake that wraps the entirety around the world. And Thor and Odin don't like this, and so as Surtur, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Thor Ragnarok, he breaks down the Rainbow Bridge alongside Loki and an army of undead corpses, the giant wolf, and the Midgardian snake, and Hela. And they take down the world while Thor and Odin target the wolf and the snake. And they succeed. Loki's army succeeds, but Thor and Odin manage to kill the snake, the wolf, and Loki himself. And finally, on to Greek mythology. Medusa, as most of you know, is a Gorgon, but that's not her original form. She was originally born a mortal female, and she was known for how attractive she was. And Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, took her as her priestess. She's in Greek mythology. She's viewed more as a damsel and a victim in her own story, rather than a filler villain like she is in modern adaptation. In Greek mythology, she came into contact with Poseidon one day. He tried to seduce her, and she rejected his advances. So Poseidon, being one of the Greek gods and not having a good moral basis, decided to rape her. Athena took offense to this. Instead of confronting Poseidon and getting rid of the problem, she took it out on Medusa, turning her into a Gorgon, a woman with snakes for hair. In turn, by isolating Medusa, because if anyone saw Medusa, they would die. For example, in Percy Jackson books, this is often skewed. Medusa is portrayed as a filler villain who can only manipulate the main characters into what needs to be done to further the plot, rather than a victim in her own story who's more marginalized than the actual characters. Though I would like to say Medusa, there are alternate versions of this legend. Medusa in the actual legend, Medusa, instead of in some legends, she accepts Poseidon's request, violating the agreements required to be a priestess of Athena. Still, I think Athena overreacted. The final myth I'm going to talk about is Hercules. Much like Medusa, Hercules is extremely misinterpreted by children's media. Also, in Disney's Hercules, Hades takes the forefront as a villain, rather than Hera, like in the original story. He is shown to try to kill Hercules by sending Pain and Panic, his two munchkins, to kill him by giving him a vial of poison that takes away his godlike immortality. But he doesn't drink all of it, resulting in him maintaining his godlike strength. But in the original story, Hera is doing all of these things, and Hercules isn't the child of Zeus and Hera like he is in the movie. He's the child of Zeus and immortal. And Hera, being the goddess of family, doesn't like this, so she gets mad, and she twists and turns his life until eventually he becomes a slave. And Hercules has to commit 12 labors to earn his freedom, instead of, like in the movie, committing active heroism to win his place with the gods. Instead, in the actual myth, how he becomes a god is he burns off his mortal half. So, in conclusion, we don't know really how to interpret these stories most of the time, as there are multiple adaptations. But most of the time, these stories are adapted to fit our culture, rather than the stories that the culture they were originally written for.